All right. It is Monday night. Rocked On Detroit Lions Off the Cuff podcast. And tonight we've got a special guest that'll be coming on right around the 8 o'clock hour. Paul Orzetti, former recruiter of Giovanni Manu out of high school. I believe he was the offensive coordinator, if I remember correctly, from Tony. What's up?
Dude. I'm just laughing at the chat. It's hilarious.
Okay.
Gremlins, yeah.
Yeah, so looking forward to having him on. It's going to be an interesting get off here to start the show because Tony's trying to cross the border into Michigan, UP. Wait a second. Paul just joined. Maybe he's not crossing the border.
Well, Tony would be.
Oh, yeah, Tony would be. All right, so Paul just joined us here. We'll bring Paul in here in just a few moments. So let me get the show kicked off. Paul's going to give us some insight into what he knows about Giovanni Manu, and haven't had a chance to even talk with him yet. It's all been over email. So we've got some questions. If you guys feel like you have some questions for Mr. Paul here tonight, please shoot us your questions in the chat, and then remind us later as we kind of get going through the show. And we'll see if we have time to get him in. I'd like to get at least one, if not two questions in from the chat tonight. So right away, Eric, what are you thinking about with Giovanni Manu being a big time, player for the Detroit Lions here in the near future?
I think it's awesome, and it's a great story. Kid from a small Polynesian, I think it's Polynesian island, coming over, kind of like Sewell and everything. And Sewell's going to take him under his wing. It's a great story. So if this kid, if his physical traits can equal what comes out on the field, oh man. If he can get the noggin part down, we're gonna have a beast.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what Manu has in store here. Over the next couple of seasons. But correct on Polynesian, so he's from the island of Tonga. And this is actually part of the statement later, but very close to the hometown of Panay Sewell in Samoa. So we'll bring Paul in. Matter of fact, I mean, he's ready and waiting. We might as well just get the show rolling. And once Tony joins, I think he has some questions for Paul as well. So we'll bring Paul in right now. Hey, there he is.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing great. So Paul, finally, good opportunity to meet you. Appreciate you taking some time out of your hectic schedule to join us tonight. So please just tell us a little bit about you, I guess your background with football, and I guess anything you'd like to share about you or the Canadian Football League right up front.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Northern Ontario, sort of right on the border with Michigan. So, played football in high school, went to college, played Canadian college football, went to UBC. So same school, obviously, that Gio's from, and played there in the, going back now, early 90s. Fortunate to be part of a national championship team at UBC. Played overseas in Europe. When football was still sort of a novelty type sport, but it's just grown tremendously over there since then. Returned to Western Canada after Europe and coached, became a high school teacher, like a lot of high school teachers, just grinding, giving lots of, just trying to grow a program. In 2008, I was invited to become a full-time coach at UBC. And then I was there until 2019 when I moved back to Northern Ontario and became an athletic director at a college up here in Sault Ste. Marie. So now my days are filled with things like hockey and baseball and sports that I'm not as familiar with. So, but always still kept a really watchful eye on the program out west at UBC, and definitely had some great ties with Gio when he was there.
Wow. That's a mouthful, man. That's a busy career. Congratulations to you. Diving right in on Manu. I mean, we've got some questions for you. We have a few questions for you about Gio. He's such an interesting prospect. One that I'm wondering if this quote unquote, I guess, bridge is starting to be, gapped between the States and Canada. Like, is there more opportunity for this in the future? But Manu, born and raised on the South Pacific island of Tonga, which obviously I said earlier, very near to Samoa, which is Panay Sewell's hometown. At 11 years old, Manu and his two siblings, along with their mother, moved to Vancouver, Canada, or somewhere in that area, as reported online. But Manu was a rugby player in Tonga and then suited up for 5 seasons at the University of British Columbia. 6'7", 352 pounds. Not sure if he was that size when he first walked in, but he is now. Was a relative unknown before impressing at his pro day, and then became the first football player taken in the NFL draft from the University of British Columbia. So the Lions, I mean, they believe Manu is loaded with untapped potential. Traded a third-round pick to pick him up this year in the draft. Overall, 126 in the fourth round. So my first question is, were you surprised that Manu was selected to the Lions at pick 126? Why or why not? And what are the Lions getting with the person and the player in Giovanni Manu, in your opinion?
Yeah, surprised, but not surprised. I mean, certainly I feel that's probably where he belongs in terms of where he was selected. If you know him, he's just an incredible human being, number one, starting. So the Lions are getting a really good person, an extremely humble and respectful person. So those are some of the best things I can say about him. But on the field, he's a sponge. He's a student of the game. I left UBC when he was just starting his career. He was actually redshirting for us in his first year. My observations of him were always that really a polite young man, gentle giant. He was smaller than he was only 6'7", 290. So he was just a little guy. He was just a little guy when we had him. And but he, you could tell that he saw, an opportunity, and he was hungry. He had all the intangibles, right? The hard work, desire, and again, just I think part of coming from where he came from, and actually I think I could be mistaken on this, but I'm pretty sure when he left Tonga, he actually came with his sister and moved in with his aunt, and I think his mom and dad both stayed in Tonga. So it was sort of a separation from the core family to get a better opportunity, and I think that probably had a massive impact on the things he wanted to become. I'm quite certain he would have been an incredible individual in whatever field he went into, but he just happened to be an enormous human being and got in. And he was actually, when I first saw him on the recruiting trail, I knew he had a basketball background as well. And there was some talk or consideration that basketball might be his future. And of course, it's 6'7". Why wouldn't it be, right? But, you sort of project, knowing what you know about NFL linemen and even CFL linemen, some length to them that they can be pretty incredible, especially if they have good feet and can move. So, he's one of those guys entirely a projection when we first saw him, and wow, is he ever, and I'll say this, he's had some great coaching at UBC, but I give Giovanni the entire credit for everything he's accomplished. I mean, he's where he is now because of who he is and how hard he's worked to get there.
That sounds like everything that we've read about Manu, just the type of person and individual he is and has been. Kind of a tough story that he's kind of fought through, but always keeping the eye on the bigger picture. Was I left my family and I made a promise, and the promise was to give them a better way of life in the future, and he followed through on that. And I think that it's such a great fit with Detroit because of, his past and kind of what he's gone through as a human being, that, we know the Lions are very big on culture, team identity. They're willing to kind of take the right guy that checks all the boxes off the football field almost before the boxes are checked on the football field. And that's kind of what's happening with Manu right now. Like, he's got the physical gift. I mean, you can't teach size. You can't teach speed. He actually has both for his size. He's got decent speed. He ran like a 4.96 40. I think he jumped like 33-inch vertical. I mean, that's incredible numbers for such a large human. But he's checking all the boxes off the field, and now he's checking some boxes on the field. But you mentioned coaching. And, what are the Lions really getting from a player like Manu? I think some of these questions are kind of going to overlap with some of your answers, but what are the Lions really getting from a player like Manu, and what initially stood out to you about Manu during the recruiting process that made him such a great fit for UBC?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with your first question with what the Lions are getting. Again, we talked about the sort of character piece, right? I think they're going to get a guy who will really fit well into Coach Campbell's system and his culture, right? And culture is so important. I mean, the Lions have just, thrived recently on his culture. And I think, Gio's a culture guy, and he comes from. It's funny, we joke, our head coach, my former boss, he's like, he could be Dan Campbell's brother. I mean, they're those type of guys. He's old school. He's straightforward. He says what he means. He's not afraid to take chances. He's bold. So he comes from, and he respects guys who work hard, and he holds guys accountable. And I think so. He comes from a program that is, I'd like to think has very similar culture and roots to the program that he's going to. So I think he'll fit in well. So the Lions are getting a guy who's used to that, and on top of which he's handled that culture with extreme humility and just continue to work hard. As far as the football player, I think they're getting a guy who is going to be a long-term pro. I hope it works out for him long-term in Detroit, but he's got great length. He's got incredible reach. He's enormous, and he moves like a much smaller man, which is unique. I mean, to find those big men who can kind of move more like a tight end, I think is really what the difference is with Gio. Just an incredible athleticism. And then the last thing I would say is that you're getting a guy who probably is a perfect fit for Detroit, given their veteran O-line and some of the strengths that they have and some of the guys that they have on that O-line to develop. I think those veteran players will sort of see the hunger that he's always shown, and maybe take him under his wing and really get to know him as a human being, because he's there to get better. That's what he's trying to do each and every practice. He's one of those guys who just want to get better. So I'm sure he'll become a real team favorite because because of the work that he'll put in and the slow, steady progression he's going to make.
Man, that's a lot. So, Manu, I think you're exactly right here. I mean, he fits what this team identity is all about. And I love the reference about the veteran leadership here for the offensive line. I think that's an incredible opportunity for Manu to be just that sponge, that fly in the wall, the guy just to kind of listen and absorb, everything that's happening around him. He's not being pushed to start right away. He can kind of gradually, walk into this knowing that he has a little bit of time. Hopefully, like, we don't want injuries, but we know how that goes in the NFL or any football players, whether it's CFL or the injuries happen. It's not if but when. Looks like Tony is going to be joining us here shortly, and I'll wait for both those guys to come in, and then we'll add them in as well. So my third question is kind of a question and a statement. Manu really, and we kind of talked a little bit about this already, but Manu sacrificed a ton to play football. He had a long and lonely path that we kind of touched on, leaving his parents on the South Pacific island of Tonga at age 11 to live with his aunt and his two older siblings, as reported in Vancouver. Manu was recently quoted during rookie minicamp and media availability with this. He said, "I was taught the values of just being humble, being true to myself, the family aspect. That's huge in Polynesian culture. I think that's why I love football as well. Being a part of a team, all these guys are considered brothers. It's a family to me. And when I consider something family, I want to do everything I can do for those people." I just found these statements incredible. I mean, a young man, right? I mean, I feel old. I may not look as old, but I feel old at 44 years old. I wouldn't have thought that way at 23 or however old he is, right? At 11 years old, though, he faced uncertainty. And here he is today, a 4th-round pick in Detroit, the 2024 NFL draft. Manu's parents still have not seen him play a snap of football in person. And he's completely gutted this out for all of these years without his parents. So this question may have touched on some of it. What does this really say about Manu's character, his dedication not only to himself, but to his team? And any thoughts about Manu's incredible story and having to go, kind of at this alone? Where was his support system?
Yeah. So, what does it say about his character? I mean, you just don't come across young men like that. They're rare, right? They're out there. And when you find one who's that rare breed of just high character kid with great athleticism, you sort of hit the jackpot, and you get one or two of those kids every recruiting class. And he was one of those kids at UBC for sure. And I think, as I said earlier, that, his parents making the sacrifices they made I think it speaks a lot about his family dynamic in terms of what they were willing to do for their son and their daughter, to send them to a different country, to live with their aunt, to get maybe a better opportunity at life. I think Gio, he carries that with him, right? Both coming from a Polynesian culture, where he's extremely respectful, but I think understanding that he's sort of carrying the family mantle in terms of taking advantage of that opportunity that he was given to sort of, leave Tonga and come to Canada and try and, carve out a great existence for himself. So he's taken that seriously. I think his maturation happened a lot faster than a lot of other 11-year-old kids, coming here as an 11-year-old. So I just think it just really bodes well for him in terms of what he's going to be. He's going to be a great teammate. I can say that much. I know he's going to work, and he's going to be serious, and he's going to be mature, and he's just going to care about, the team and getting better.
Man, that's an awesome statement. So, hey, Tony, welcome into tonight's show, man. How you doing tonight?
Great. Well, thanks a lot for having me. Welcome. Glad to be back. Hey, Coach.
Hey,
how you doing, Paul?
Good.
You guys don't know each other, do you? I mean, come on.
Everybody in Canada knows each other.
That's right.
You know each other.
So let's shoot one over to Tony. You ready to ask this gentleman a question about Manu?
Yeah, sounds good. So I know Paul from Sault Ste. Marie. He's a football coach over in the Sioux, and I coached his nephew actually this past year in high school. So kind of know him through that. But
Uh-oh.
Tony,
you're gonna have to repeat. I lost everything for a moment. Go ahead and repeat that. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, no worries. So how did you originally hear about Manu, and at what point did you guys start recruiting him? Obviously coming from where he did, a little bit out there. So what was your first impression, and how did you first get in touch with him?
It's funny, and this would not be dissimilar to any university coach. You get out on the recruiting trail, right? And I didn't know much about Gio. I'd heard there was a big kid out in Pitt Meadows, which was about an hour from Vancouver. As part of my job as an assistant coach, I was also tasked, like all of our assistant coaches, and just sort of doing, responsible for certain areas, certain schools. So I went out and watched the game, again, just as part of my normal responsibilities. He wasn't lighting the world on fire as a football player. And I think I'm not even sure how many years he played high school football. So he wasn't an incredible football player when we first saw him, but what he was enormous, right? And so when you see a game and everybody's about 6 feet tall, and then you see a guy that's 6'7", you happen to, it's pretty easy to catch your eye, right? And I think he played some D line and played some O line, and I always tell a story, and I have a great laugh with Coach Nill. I don't know if he likes me telling. Put it this way: I will give Coach Nill such huge credit for developing the man that Gio became. But the story of how we got him to UBC was a little bit funny, because when I got back to the college, I was showing Coach some of his film, and he saw a big tall guy who could be something, but what wasn't, just wasn't I wasn't in love right away. And I kept saying, Coach, we got to get him in for a meeting. So this went on for a number of days. And finally I just said, Gio, come out to the campus with your aunt or your sister, and I'll introduce you to Coach Nill, because Coach Nill is one of these guys, if he sees you in person and he sort of touches the goods, then he gets sold. So I brought him out to campus, and I just still remember the look on his face, looking at this, Polynesian kid, 6'8", just, big calves, looked athletic. And Coach said, "Who is that?" that's the guy I've been, kind of talking to you about, right? And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I thought he was just some big Italian kid, right? Because his name was Giovanni, right?" And I said, "Don't worry, Coach, I won't take any offense because I'm Italian, right?" But anyways, he got him into his office, and Coach has an incredible eye for talent. We refer to our coach at UBC as kind of like the Nick Saban of Canadian university football. He's been to 9 national championships. He's an incredible coach. He's sent, I think, through all the programs he's worked with, I think 5 or 6 guys down to the NFL, either as free agent or draft pick. So he's really done a great job in developing players, but he's got a great eye. And when he saw him, it was funny. That meeting went from, sort of, who's this guy, to you're coming, here's your scholarship offer. Don't worry, we got a communication plan. These are the courses you're going to take. And the meeting was supposed to be sort of a meet and greet. And I think it went on for a couple hours, and he was pretty sold. And I think, Coach is a great, he's a great salesman of his program, but he's also very compelling because a bit like Dan Campbell, he really shares his vision. Right. And, I even remember him saying, you're going to go on and play football once you're done at UBC if you come here. Right. And I don't know that he was throwing around the idea of the NFL, but I think knowing Coach Neal and knowing what he can do with some of these guys, I think he probably thought, you give me that canvas and I'm going to paint a pretty good picture. So that's how we arrived. He arrived on campus, and first year he redshirted. He was all legs and arms, and surprisingly enough, at 290 pounds or whatever, he looked kind of skinny. And I heard somebody from one of the Lions broadcasts saying that he's a slim 350, which he is actually. He carries his weight really well and he moves well. So, but that was. And then it was that year I was there 1 year and didn't have any crossover work with them in my position group. So, but just got to know him a bit as a person and was there one season. And then it's been just an absolute delight to keep my eye on the program and see where he's come, where he's gone to. And I don't know, not sure if you guys knew this, but our other tackle at UBC this year signed with the Chicago Bears. So a little bit of rivalry on our O-line. We have our left and right tackles both going on to the NFL. And Theo Benedict, who is also one of the it was the right tackle. He was the most decorated Canadian university offensive lineman, kind of probably like was it the Outland Award or the best O lineman in the U.S. He won our best O lineman award, best lineman O or D line 2 years in a row for Canadian University football. So there's a couple good ones came from that from UBC this year.
And that was Theo that went to the Chicago Bears.
Correct.
So I'm gonna have to look into that, gentleman. I guess I didn't hear about that during this process. So you mentioned Coach Neal, and I actually had a question in here. It was recently written by various sports outlets that Giovanni Manu chose the University of British Columbia because of Coach Neal instead of playing across the border for the Washington Huskies. Manu was quoted as saying he sort of played that father figure role, knowing that my parents weren't around. It was a no-brainer for me to go play for a guy like that. So the question is, what can you tell us? I mean, I think you kind of gave us some information about the decision, that Manu made with Coach Neal to play, obviously, for UBC, and you kind of bridging that gap there. But why was it the right decision for Manu to play for a coach like Coach Neal? And what are these similarities that people are pointing to between Coach Neal and Dan Campbell that you can kind of expand upon?
Sure. Well, I mean, his enthusiasm. First of all, Coach Neal, I consider him one of my best friends, mentors, best coach I've ever worked for. But I would say, and not knowing Dan Campbell, but I would say his enthusiasm and his drive and his passion is so infectious. And I think underneath all that, the guys know that he cares about them, that he really genuinely cares about them. It's not just the wins and the losses. It's about them as people, them developing, them being part of something bigger. He's great at sharing that vision. He's honest, and he speaks and he makes bold statements and he backs them up. And I think those are the similarities that I see. I was, again, wasn't, as part of the initial process with Gio, but what I saw initially was that I think Gio probably saw a guy that here's a person who's asked me a lot of questions about me. Has asked me it hasn't just said, we project you as a left tackle and you're going to do this on the football field. Saw some real things about him as a person, got to know him, found out about his situation, how he got to Canada. So I think almost instantly Gio was probably taken by, just how close a relationship that Coach Neal built with him.
Again, I apologize. I don't know what happened. It just dipped out. Yep. Internet. We got a bad storm coming here tonight, so it could be affecting us. I apologize. Continue on, Coach Paul.
No, I just said, again, just the type of people they are. Coach Neal is very, very similar, and he's fiery too. Our guys they don't want to let him down. they're all drinking the Kool-Aid, and they just don't want to let him down. And he is fiery on game day. And I see Coach Campbell. He just reminds me of him. And even the coaches, like we're all on high alert during game day because we don't want to let him down either. But incredible man, incredible human being, cares about his guys. And I think that probably resonated with Gio. Is here's a guy who cares about me and actually has talked about what I can become as a young man and as a student, and that I'm going to get a degree, and that he's going to do everything he can to move me on to whatever potential I have, whether that's just being an All-Canadian at university or maybe a CFL opportunity, or again, best case scenario, the NFL. So I think it wouldn't have been hard for Gio to see that there was a plan in place for him right away, and that he probably fell in love with that. And to be honest with you, I wasn't aware of the University of Washington stuff. They may have been in contact with him just simply because of his sheer size. And I love Gio, and he's going to be an awesome NFLer. But his high school film was not was unpolished. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Tony, we'll go back to you. I know you got a couple of questions, and before we go kind of off topic with non-Geo stuff, why don't you fire one away?
Sounds good. So the one question I wanted to ask, regarding the jump from CIS to the NFL. I mean, that's a legitimate concern that a lot of people have. Paul, going from CIS to the NFL, I've kind of compared it to almost going from like a JV program in the States to going to start in the Big Ten. That's kind of the comparison, right? And the jump in competition. How is a guy who's, played in, CIS, played at UBC, how's he going to match up with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, right? That little jump in level. And why do you think the Lions have kind of been targeting a lot of Canadian athletes lately and a lot of CIS guys? Just kind of talk about how his game could translate to the NFL level and why you think he could have some success.
Sure. I mean, I think clearly there's a big gap. I mean, I've always, if I had to equate what Canadian university football is compared to, say, NCAA, most Canadian schools are the top third of them. There's 28 universities in Canada that play football. They're probably equivalent to NCAA Division II. So think of it more like an NCAA Division II school that, once every 20 years has a guy on their team who ends up going to the NFL. That's probably the best analogy. You can still find incredible athletes and individuals on NCAA Division II teams that you recognize that even though they're not playing at maybe the same speed or against the same competition, they have some things in their whether it's physically or things that they do that are special, right? And I mean, I don't know how many people are in the NFL right now from Division II football in the NCAA, but I would imagine there's probably quite a few, right? But that's about the brand that Canadian universities at. I think with Gio, most Canadians, by the time they're done playing university, they've probably played about 40 or 50 less competitive games from, say, an American high school player who's gone through the high school ranks and then gone to the NCAA. The seasons are a little bit shorter. So I think experience is going to be something that, he'll just have to, but that I wouldn't be worried about. He has the raw pieces to close that gap. And I think, I don't know, exposure, when I look at your other pick there, awesome kid, Betts. I coached against Betts when we played Laval University, when he was a University of Laval football player. And he was and he actually turned down an offer to Purdue to go to Laval in Quebec, and could have been a D1 guy. And he just ripped Canadian university football apart, has been an unbelievable pro. I hear he projects maybe as a linebacker in the NFL, but certainly in the CFL as a DN, he's been incredible. And I guess it's one of those things that if you're a hardworking GM or scout and you're willing to sort of look in places where maybe, you don't find a lot of talent or frequently find a lot of talent, you can be rewarded because there are those guys out there that exist. And for whatever reason, I mean, Gio's a great example. He's almost like an accidental NFLer, but at some point you just can't hide 6'8", 350 pounder, right? I mean, his skill set, his testing, all those things, he would have been a free agent signing, even if he wasn't drafted. Betts, he wanted to play in Canada for his university. He wanted to go to Laval University, one of the most storied Canadian universities, and it's a great academic school. And so he wanted to stay in Canada, and he probably knew on some level that may impact his draftability in the NFL. And he went to the CFL, and he's had an incredible career. I really think you're getting a great one there. Like, he's a bit of a sleeper too, but I think it speaks volumes about the homework that the Lions are doing to find these guys, because you just don't see them. You don't hear about them. You don't see them, but it's very similar to finding an incredible prospect from an NCAA Division II school, right? They're there, but you have to be an organization that's really willing to dig and do some research and do some homework. So kudos to the Lions, because they've found a couple really good ones that people are going to be left scratching the head with. How did they get these guys, right? So
that's telling of Brad Holmes' style. I mean, he will reach into crevices that nobody else will go to find players to help this team win. So speaking of Matthew Betts, I hope I pronounced his name right. Eric had a question that kind of talks about some of the other players as well. So Eric, why don't you fire away that question? And then just a quick stat here. About 4% of the NFL makeup throughout the season is D2, D3 players. So it's about 70 players per year that come from the D2, D3 ranks. And I like your comparison there of Manu kind of coming from a D2, to the NFL. I think that's a great comparison. It gives us something to consider now. And I think it's spot on to believe that you can't hide a man with that kind of size and the physical gifts and athleticism that he does, have. There will be some teams that will find a way to utilize those. And I think the Lions have found one, and they're going to develop them the right way. And I think that the sky's the limit for Manu. I'm really excited to see him develop, probably more than anybody else on the team right now. So it's interesting to listen to you talk about all of these different, kind of scenarios and to learn more about the CFL process. So, Eric, you're up next.
All right. So, Paul, with Betts, Stiggers, and now Manu coming from Canadian football programs, one, do you think that Canadian football players will get more looks at the NFL level? And two, have you seen any players currently or in the last season or two that you feel can make the jump to the NFL?
Well, I think, what's less common, so great questions. There are, what tends to happen is some of the top Canadian kids after high school, they get sort of vacuumed up by the NCAA, right? So there are a few, I don't know how many exactly, but there's probably a dozen or so Canadian players in the NFL that went the NCAA route. So they're, again, easier to find, had a different path. I think, forget his first name, Holland. He's down in Miami, but he's a Canadian kid from Vancouver. We actually had another kid, an O-lineman from Vancouver, who graduated in 2016 at UBC, who's with the Dallas Cowboys right now. Now, he wasn't drafted, so Gio goes down as our first ever draft pick, but his name is Dakota Shepley, and he's been in the NFL since 2016. He was with the Seahawks, the 49ers, and now the Cowboys, and he's a center. So it happens, but again, I mean, I think my own personal theory is that, unfortunately in North America, the sport of football has retracted slightly over the last 20 years, whether it be concussions or whatever the issue may be. So that the pool of players has sort of shrunk a bit. And I think it's, and I think at the same time, I think the coaching and the level of play in U Sport, which is Canadian University, has probably improved. So that coalesces a bit, I think, to create more opportunities for Canadians coming out of Canadian universities, because I think in total there are, even after COVID, you can read articles where there's just amateur football, contact football has sort of retracted a bit, which is interesting because it's funny. I had an opportunity to coach with the Canadian national team over in China, and everywhere else in this world that plays, contact football, it's growing. It's growing like wildfire. Like in Germany, there's 119 universities in Japan playing, American football. So it's growing everywhere else, but North America, it seems to have, and I hope we've sort of hit the swing back of the pendulum post concussions and rule changes and all these types of things, where parents are feeling more comfortable to get their kids into football. But that's part of my theory, is that you're just, there's more opportunities, maybe because the pool isn't quite as big. And I'd like to think that over the last 20, 30 years, Canadian university football has also gotten to a level where, there's some kids that are maybe getting a look.
So you can't ignore it anymore. The Canadian Football League is growing, man. It's awesome. We know that as Detroit Lions fans, about 25% of our fan base comes from across the border. I had no idea that about 25% of season tickets were Canadian owned. I found that to be an interesting stat. I don't know what it is this year, but again, the Lions have sold out season tickets once again. What else do you have, Tony? What's your next question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say something else too, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying there, Coach. I think the reason you're seeing more Canadians kind of excel at the NFL level, and especially in college, is because you're also seeing a growth in the grassroots campaign, right? Minor football in Canada wasn't something that was really popular and really played much until the last maybe 20 years or so, right? You're starting to see a real grassroots campaign of kids playing football at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, kind of like what you guys have over here. So I think you're just kind of starting to see the beginning, right, Paul, of what the of what can be accomplished. You guys at Sioux College are putting in a new you guys are putting in a new football team, right, at the college. So again, it just speaks to the growth of what football is. And I do think you're going to see a lot more Canadians coming over here. So Paul, just in terms of the growth of the game that you have seen, you've been around the game a long time. Just talk about the growth, not necessarily in how the game and how many people are playing, but just in the quality of football that you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak, more to Canadian university. I think, when I first started 15, maybe even 20 years ago at the university level, we had, you'd have one full-time coach, which for an NCAA school would be unheard of, right? So, and now Canadian universities, they have 5, 6 coaches, and they're better funded, and scholarship amounts have gone up. So you're able to attract better kids. We had actually 4 or 5 really good American kids playing for us at UBC that were being recruited heavily by D2 and D1 AA schools in the US that we ended up landing, right? So I think the ability for Canadian schools to attract more kids is a big thing too. And then, looking at the CFL, I mean, it's funny because in the CFL, you tend to see certain positions really sort of break through, or certain free agents sort of break through to that American, to the NFL, or get looks in the NFL. Typically, they end up being guys who play receiver, a defensive back, and quarterback, because we're a 3-down league where the ball's in the air 80% of the time, right? So if you play in one of those positions, you're getting a lot more reps, more opportunities. Where we struggle is, running back type positions. Those positions really have a hard time sort of cracking into a higher level. But to Tony's point, yeah, I mean, it's the quality. What I notice is really the quality of coaching and the quality of players seem to have gotten better, north of the border.
That's awesome. I love the grassroots campaign, man, getting kids involved into it at a younger age and supporting, the growth of the sport. I think that's incredible. There's an intriguing thing kind of happening here with Manu that, over the course of rookie minicamp, he had some early opportunity at tackle, and Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell both have come out to say that, his initial slot is supposed to be right guard. He's going to be cross-trained at both positions, but they're definitely trying to get him up to speed at the right guard position where we're more thin. At least I believe we're more thin. So he will be joining one of the best offensive lines in the league with Penei Sewell, an all-pro tackle, Taylor Decker, one of the old vets on the team, pretty darn good himself, and a pair of Pro Bowlers last couple seasons, Frank Ragnow and new guard Kevin Zeitler. Manu was quoted again during this rookie mini camp, during rookie mini camp and media availability as saying this. He said, "One thing about me is I refuse to get outworked by my peers and my opponents. That's one thing that I carry myself, because the way I look at this is if someone outworks me, it stops me from feeding my family, and my family means everything to me. So if you're stopping me from feeding my family, that's just going to add more fuel to my fire. So that's just the way I approach this. What an incredible statement by Manu. So my question is just how good of a situation is this for Manu, and what do you expect for his growth and development at the next level and this possible transition into guard over the short term, from what we understand is a short-term transition? Just how well do you think he's going to be able to do, surrounded by all of these amazing players and coaches? Hank Fraley is one of the best coaches of the offensive line probably in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, we touched on it earlier. I think he's going to thrive. It's a perfect scenario for him. He doesn't have to come in year one and try and either take over somebody's job or establish himself as a starter and being at that level. I think he's going to do exactly what he did at UBC, which is show slow, steady progression towards his goal. He's very methodical that way. He will just set his sights on, becoming a regular starter, and he'll just close the gap every practice to until he reaches that goal. And because of his mindset and because he's so mentally strong, I think he'll just, say, you can put me wherever you want to put me, and he's humble, and he really just wants to, play and be a starter. And so I think whether he ends up a right guard or right tackle or, who knows where he will just embrace whatever role he's given. And he's like a sponge. He'll just eat it up. And that's why I really think having that veteran group of linemen will be great for him, because I think they're going to appreciate that, versus somebody who comes in and maybe comes in with maybe a higher pedigree or was a first round pick. There might be a little more tension in terms of, maybe this guy's coming for my job. I think, the guys will, and not to say that he's not competing for somebody's job, but I think they'll embrace just who he is as a person, how hard he works, and that, he believes in team first. Right. So
that's awesome. So shout out to the chat here that's joining us tonight. You got a lot of people watching us tonight, Coach. And we're going to try to drum up a couple of questions from them. Tony, do you have any other questions for Paul here?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much answered everything that we've had. I definitely appreciate this. And, obviously, you talked to Gio, and I guess my only other question was, you spoke to him after the draft. Can you just kind of relay his excitement or how he was feeling after the draft?
Well, here's all I can say is that, this is how the type of kid he is. I mean, my role, I always say, was very minuscule in what he's become. He got to where he got to because of him. And then he had some great, 5-year coaching out at UBC and redshirted. And so lots of people working with him, helping him. But I think, the core piece came from him. But to his credit, to his character, just like I knew he would, every person along that, pathway, I'm sure I was, and I was one of them, but I'm sure everybody else as well, received a text right after the draft saying, "Hey, thanks for your help." Thanks for asking me to come to UBC. His sentiment was that going to UBC really made a difference for him. And, and Coach Nill is, again, if you know him, that he probably moved the needle a lot further than most coaches could have in Canada with a guy like Gio. But just a credit to, he was super excited. He was excited to be going to the Lions. And from a selfish standpoint, now having lived on the West Coast and being back in Ontario and only being 5 hours from Detroit, it was the perfect scenario, for me, because I'll get a chance to get down to Detroit and watch him play a bit. And but he just, again, really went, I'm sure he took the time immediately following the draft when other people might've been out partying and doing whatever to send a message to everybody along the way, to thank them for their help in his career. And that's just who he is, which is incredible.
Man, just a Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes kind of guy. So I got two more things for you. Mailbag question that came in during the week was, how many Polynesian type players have you been around? Have you had an opportunity to kind of coach or be part of them? And is there something that separates, their culture and the way they are as people that help them excel in things like playing sports and football or, any athletics? Aside from the size, is there a mental component here that they're just really driven people from what you read and what, you understand about their culture, which is very little. I'm learning, but what could you say about the Polynesian, effect here, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by this disclaimer. I don't pretend to be an expert in the Polynesian culture, but the ones I've had the good fortune to coach over the last 10 years when I was at UBC were, I would say, extremely respectful, and you'll find that in any group of people, but that particular group of players, extremely respectful and serious about what they're doing, right? It's, football is not just, well, I'm good at it, I do it, I have some fun, who knows where this is going to go. They're serious about the outcome. They're serious about where they're going and why they're playing football and what they want to become. They have big dreams about, being in the NFL. And those are the ones that's what stands out to me. But probably the most is just how great human beings they are and how respectful, so those are my experiences.
That's awesome. So we have season tickets over here. We as a football club. So if you ever do want to make it to a game, I'll be more than happy to extend a ticket, bring you across the border, show you a good time. Appreciate all of your time tonight. Yeah. Unless the guys have anything else to say, go ahead, Eric, shoot it off.
I'll do one more, and it's a 2-part question if you're ready for this.
Sure.
With Manu making the jump to the NFL, in your opinion, how long do you think it will take before he can become a starter in the NFL? And then 2, could you see him in a William the Fridge Perry role coming in as a running back on a goal line situation?
Well, you can always hope, right? So I would say to your first question, I see timeline wise, I really feel like the Lions have invested in him, and by trading up to get him and giving and trading away a pick for him, I think they're committed to him. So I see his horizon. Worst case scenario is being 2 years on the roster, but that's sort of actually what I see his horizon for being sort of maybe a regular starter. I don't see him. There are going to be some deficits there for sure. There's and those are experience and speed and timing and everything else. But never say never. He's exceeded all my expectations all along the way. But if I had to be conservative in my approach, I would say, at some point in his second year, I see him being a guy that's getting some regular snaps. And then once he embeds himself in that role, he could be a 10-year player. That's who I think he'll be. As far as the handoffs, you almost have to reach up to give the ball to him. So I think I'd rather put him as a well, yeah, I don't know if I'm bringing up some bad memories here, but I was going to say I could put him as an O-lineman catching a pass, right?
No.
Yeah, I know. So I know he'll report. He comes from a good school, and, very, very academic. So anyways, I think he can. I think he could be that kind of guy because he's athletic enough. If you put him on the end of the line, he would do a great job for you. So I'm excited for you guys. So it should be an incredible season, and I look forward to watching it. It's been a great honor to be with you guys tonight. It's really cool.
We appreciate your time, man. We know you got a crazy schedule, and Tony, thank you for bridging the gap here and getting Mr. Paul on tonight. Coach, man, awesome details. Always about the details. Appreciate you. Have a good night,
guys.
my man.
Have a good night. Yeah, hopefully we get you back on too once Gio gets into a game, eh?
That's right. Well, or we send you another, Detroit Lion from UBC. So
that's right.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go. Take care, man. Appreciate you. Oh, let's fix that screen. Oh, hey, awesome guest. So great job by Paul. It's Orzetti, right? Am I pronouncing his last name right? Orzetti. Or Italian, they pronounce their names differently all over the place. So man, we learned a lot. We learned a lot tonight. I hope that the chat learned a lot tonight about Giovanni Manu. Did I just learn that he's a Cowboys fan? Is Paul a Cowboys fan? Is that what I'm gathering here?
I don't think he's a Cowboys fan, but he was just saying that the Cowboys had another guy.
So I learned a lot tonight, man. Look, the Gio, excelling into his first season, and maybe getting a chance in year 2, like he was speaking about there at the end. It kind of makes perfect sense when you look at the progression of the offensive line right now. So Zeitler is a 1-year deal, right? Graham is 3. Panay is locked up for life, right at this point. Taylor Decker is entering the last season, I believe, or two seasons of his contract. So there is a guard position that is opening up on the right side. We also have Mahogany, who is also a tackle, I believe, at this point, right? I don't think they've moved him anywhere. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, who fights for that open spot next year, unless they extend another contract to Zeitler, you know, if he has a great season. But that could be Manu 2025 right there in the inside next to Panay.
So, Will, my question is this. I have a question for you guys, because there is a bit of a concern, and I thought about this listening to you guys talk. You know, we have you know, Decker, Zeitler, Ragnow, Graham, all guys who are a little bit older, a little bit of you know, tread on the tires, so to speak, and injuries, you know, are kind of sneaking up on these guys a little bit more, right? My concern is what happens if, you know, 3 of these guys go down, and then all of a sudden Gio's almost forced into a playing situation where maybe he's not quite ready for it, right? You know, this is the year, I think it's pretty safe to say, that we're going for the Super Bowl, right? It's, you know, you don't want to say Super Bowl or bust, but it kind of feels that way in a sense, especially with, you know, this Jared Goff thing. So, you know, are we willing to kind of put in?
Was that a snide at his contract? What was that?
It was, you know what? Maybe a little snide comment, but anyway, my question is are you guys a little bit concerned though, going in with that possibility that, hey, a couple guys go down, you know, we might be relying on a guy who played CIS football last year to be, you know, starting for us in the playoffs?
You know, I'm not worried, and here's why. For the last 3 seasons, since Dan Campbell's been there and Hank Fairley has stepped into that role, he has had this offensive line always ready. I mean, was it 21 or 22? I think it might have been 22. We had more than 10 different offensive line formations before like week 8 or week 9. Last year, same thing. I think we had like 8 or 9 different offensive line formations. It was after week 1. I mean, we already lost Vaitai, right? And then we lost Decker. Was it Decker, or I think it was Decker. We lost Decker shortly after. Then Ragnow got injured for a couple of games. So, you know, is he frozen? We've had a few. Is he still on?
Yeah, he's still here.
I'm still here. I can't see myself on my screen, but I'm still here.
Strange.
Interesting. Well, he's still there. I'll leave it on the screen. You're just going to be a voice, I guess, at this point. So I guess that's why I'm not worried about it, because we've been through that, right? And we've been through that with guys like Colby Sorsdahl, Coyote Awosika. I can't remember who it was last or the year before last, but they weren't good guys. I mean, it's not like these were guys that we wanted in the game. And I mean, hell, we even played with Coyote Awosika in the NFC Championship game, and he fared pretty well. So if it's just one guy at a time, no, I'm not worried. Now, if we lost Panay, Taylor Decker, and Frank Ragnow, you can cash in the whole season. I mean, I think that would be for any team. You could cash it in. I don't care who their backups are. If you're a top 5 offense in this league and you lose 3 of your number 1 guys, your all Pro Bowl guys, I mean, any team is going to suffer. But I think that's why Brad Holmes likes to keep a little kitty in his back pocket so he can pull off a trade or, you know, get somebody in if he needs to in a pinch. Thankfully, we just haven't had to do it. But I think that's why you saw, you know, I guess to extend my answer, that's why you saw Brad Holmes do what he did this year. He went hard at corner, so we have plenty of backups. And then he went hard on the offensive line, so we have plenty of backups that he's grooming, you know, with Coyote and Colby Sorsdahl. Look, I mean, Colby's got to take a big jump this year. He has to. We don't want him to play, but he has to take a big jump. Is that a good enough answer? Or are you still not satisfied?
I'm satisfied with it. My complaint though, or my concern is still this, right? You're naming all these guys like Sorsdahl and all these guys who stepped in last year. Good for them, but these guys have had experience playing against Big Ten football or, you know, NCAA D1. You know, these guys have had NFL experience. We're relying on a guy, again, if you're going to compare it, who played D2 football last year, and now you're going to expect him to go out there and play against the big boys. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying it's a huge, huge jump, and there is a little bit of concern there. I'm not saying we're gonna, just freak out about it, but I do have a little bit of concern about that. That's it.
So for me, all right. So Kobe Sorsdahl was William and Mary, so he definitely didn't get Big Ten football experience. You know what I mean? So Coyote Iwosika, I think, has played football for 4 years his entire life. He came over from somewhere. I don't remember where now. I think was it somewhere over in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look it up. But he hasn't played a ton of football. I mean, they both did okay. I think this, Tony, it all comes down to coaching, man. He's got the physical gifts and the tools and the athleticism. Now it's time on, time on attention. It's figuring out the details, and then just putting it together and staying accountable. And if what I heard from Paul is who Manu is, it sounds like this guy is going to be a winner, and he's going to be fighting for a starting spot day one in training camp. And that's just his mentality. So I feel comfortable from that aspect. Now learning Ben Johnson's offense, that's going to be different. That's the most challenging aspect, I think. I don't think it's handling the guys that they're going up against. I think it's learning the offense and all the cues. I think that's where the disconnect is going to be.
I do think that they're going to use him actually. Well, I wanted your opinion on this too, Will and Eric, because I have been thinking about him, right? Being as athletic as he is and being a terrific blocker, if you look at what Ben Johnson's offense does quite a bit, right, especially in the run game, is what made Brock Wright so valuable. What makes Brock Wright so valuable is his motion, his movements, how he can block, those types of things. Can you imagine having Gio, who's just, who's an athletic big guy, imagine him running, motioning across and just kind of lead blocking up, like, you got him, him coming off of Sewell, sealing the edge and letting Gibbs just get to that corner. Those are things that I kind of envision possibly happening with him. I know that might be a bit of a stretch, but what do you guys think on that? Do you think he has the ability to kind of do something like that?
I mean, if he's going to be a pulling guard, which is where they're putting him at right now as right guard, I think is training camp from what I've heard, right? Through all the various reports is right guard is where they're going to try to give him the most opportunity. If he's a pulling guard, hell yeah, I could see it. But he's got the physical gifts and the tools, and he has the speed. He ran a 4.96 40. That's pretty darn fast for a 6'7", 6'8", 355-pound man. I mean, that's cruising. Penei Sewell has shown the ability to get to the second and third level with ease. And heck, he's even caught a first down. He's got nice soft hands. And I think Manu even said something at some point about where he was asked about, catching a pass, or maybe that was Mahogany. They asked about catching a touchdown or something. But I guess we'll just have to see where it goes. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for Manu. I'm going to have to look at his tape. Did he do anything, like that at UBC? Is he familiar and comfortable with pulling and moving up, to the second and third level? I don't know. I would say that there's an opportunity through coaching and training. But according to Eric, though, he thinks that this guy is going to be like the fridge lined up as a fullback and jamming in from the goal line.
I know.
That's what I want to see. Let's see this kid with the ball in his hand.
Wishful fan thinking, right?
Yeah. Hey, I am the fan. That's what I want to see.
Go ahead.
I'm
Will.
sorry.
No, go ahead, Will. Sorry about that. Go ahead. You're good.
No, I was going to say, so we had some breaking news today about Jared Goff's massive extension. 4 years, $212 million, $170 million guaranteed. All I got to say to everybody in the chat that's a Jared Goff hater, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. It was going to happen. We were expecting it to happen, end of May, early June. Brad Holmes one-upped me again, and he did it like 2 days later after the podcast. Hey, good work. I'm glad it's done. Tony, what is your real take on this? How do you really feel about Jared Goff and this, him sticking around till 2028?
It's a good thing you can't see my facial expression right now. That's all I'm saying. So listen, let me say this. I like Jared Goff. Okay. I like Jared Goff. I think he's been absolutely amazing for the Lions. So it's not that I'm a Jared Goff hater at all. What I hate is $53 million for this quarterback. It makes absolutely zero sense as to why you would do this. So when this contract was first reported, it was reported 4 years at $212 million. I absolutely lost my marbles. Then later on, ESPN reported that it was a 5-year contract worth $212 million. And I was slightly less mad because, again, do I think he's a $53 million a year quarterback? Absolutely not. But, I can live with paying him 40 to 45 because, again, even though I don't love the guy, as much as I think they overspent, we can live with that range. Now you're asking Jared Goff to go out and win football games for you. Love him or hate him. And this goes to the lovers of Jared Goff. Jared Goff didn't go out, and I would argue this all day long. Jared Goff never went out and won us a football game. What won us a football game was our offensive line, was our running game. Jared Goff actually name one game where Jared Goff took the team on his back, had a 75-yard drive all through the air,
Tampa Bay,
and won us the game.
A ton of them. I mean, you could start with our first playoff win, right? I mean, they had to get the first down. That's one. You could start with the go win route to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, you could go back to 2022 week 18 against the Green Bay Packers. I mean, there was plenty of plays made. I mean, there's tons of plays that he's made, passing the football and consistently working the field. I mean, he's had so many long drives. I mean, he is like number 1 or number 2 in the league for explosive plays over 20 yards through the air, not caught and ran, 20-yard passes through the air, then caught, then Yak is after that. So there's been tons of plays, and I guess I couldn't go through them, all off memory, but now I'm going to have to do it. Now I'm going to have to make a video on it or something because there's plenty. And if people don't think that Jared Goff is valuable to help this team win, I don't know what games you're watching, because what I see is somebody that does put this team on his back, that does get up after getting completely knocked out, standing like the Statue of Liberty against the Seahawks and gets completely killed, and then just stands up like nothing happened. I mean, the guy's durable, and he's a leader, and he puts his guys in the right position. I think that the most important thing that that we should consider about Jared Goff is he's one of the quickest to get the ball out. At 2.6 seconds, he's getting the ball out. One of the fastest in the league. That's winning ball games. That's being a smart quarterback. That's getting through your progressions and making the right decision. Not many other quarterbacks are doing that. So he's evading the rush. He's evading the sacks. He's got low sack rates. He's got low interception rates. That's helping, this team win games.
So my comeback to that, Will, is pretty simple. You're right. Everything you said is right. However, he's a Ben Johnson quarterback. He is the perfect quarterback for Ben Johnson's system. What are we going to do next year when Ben Johnson goes and takes a head coaching job, and then you have some other coach come in and want to throw the ball 50 times a game and, goes against what everything Goff does well, right? I think that this is more credit to Ben Johnson than it is to Jared Goff. And again, it's not that I hate Jared Goff. I love Jared Goff as a person. I love what he's done for the city. I just think that $53 million a year for this guy is absolutely outrageous, and it was just overspent, right? It's just too much money for that position. We aren't that good, and we aren't that deep at other positions. I know you guys are all, we're so deep. We have all these, again, I'll argue this till the season starts. We have one NFL quality wide receiver on this roster. One. We have one.
We don't know about the rest yet because they really didn't play last year. Now, I would say that we are thin at wide receiver, and until we see what happens in training camp. But I don't think that Dan Campbell or Brad Holmes would gamble an entire season not bringing in a wide receiver if they felt that DPJ and J-Mo and Antoine Green weren't ready to step up. I mean, I don't care where players are picked anymore. I think that Brad Holmes has proven that already. It does not matter where he picks these players. Every one of them can turn out to be something. But but what you just said though is this is a Ben Johnson's Goff. Like the Goff is Goff because of Ben Johnson. Goff and Ben Johnson got together when Goff came to the team, right? And Ben Johnson became the offensive coordinator. They worked out a plan together that said, where do you excel at? What type of plays do you feel most comfortable, operating? And how can we take advantage of the new NFL defensive rules? That's what they put together. And if you look at just about every offense around the league, they're all doing the same damn thing. They're all throwing the ball over the middle. They're all throwing these little hitch routes over the middle or off the side. Every team. And that just so happens to be Amon-Ra's bread and butter. And it just so happens to be Sam Laporta's bread and butter. So they're bringing players in, not just Goff. They're bringing other players into this team that all do the same thing well. And the last thing I'll say about Ben Johnson leaving, Dan Campbell is not going to bring in an offensive coordinator that's not going to run his offense. We can't forget that Dan Campbell was running the offense until about week 10 of 2022. So this is Dan Campbell's offense that he's now integrated with Ben Johnson's genius and Jared Goff's, best abilities, if you will, which is the smart way to do it. I don't think that you just go out and grab a quarterback and a wide receiver because they don't do something well. You want to use what they do well and then accentuate that into the playbook. I don't know who wouldn't want to do that. I don't want to force them to do things they don't do well. That's how you get players like James Houston hurt last year. AG, making him do things he doesn't do well, like covering tight ends down the field. So there could be a hot debate. I mean, I think that we could talk about it another day, but look, Jared Goff, I don't know who reported a 5-year, it's a 4-year extension. So if he's paid 33 this year and then 212, and then you divide that by 5 years, it's $49 million a year. Which would make him still a top 5 quarterback, pay rate. But next year, it'll be $60 million. The year after that will be 65. The year after that will be almost $70 million a year for a quarterback. So in a couple of seasons, this is going to be a discount. It'll be a good contract. But it's not like no other team wouldn't have paid him this. I mean, what other quarterback has had the amount of wins, the amount of yards, the amount of stats, finished in the top 10, if not top 5 of almost every important category? There's only a handful. There's only a handful of quarterbacks that are anywhere close to what Jared Goff is doing right now. But I do agree. We are thin at wide receiver until we know what these guys are all about. What do you got to say, Eric or Tony?
All right. Have my hand up in class.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not watching the stream right now. Sorry.
Okay. This is my thing. The first game that we played in Tampa Bay last October, David Montgomery went down early in that game. Gibbs was already hurt. We went to Craig Reynolds as our running back. What happened? Jared Goff put the team on his back and won us that game. I don't care what anybody says. He won that game. And that's all the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, but I mean, you can look at some of the games that we lost this season, and he was terrible. So there's that too. Here's I know you said we talk about this later, and this is my counter to just kind of what you were saying, though. So teams now, it's going to be, I can already see what NFL defenses are going to do to us, right? They're going to run a cover. They're going to cheat the safety over to Jamison Williams' side. So they'll kind of double team him deep. And then they'll run, maybe a man under against St. Brown. And then they're going to stack the box because they know we like to run the ball.
Well, what are they going to do about Laporta?
Well, again, they're going to have to put a linebacker on Laporta, or they're going to have to almost put a DB. I think you're going to see teams run a lot of nickel against us this year. For that,
that's the only defense. I mean, the one thing that I'll say about our offense is you have to play our offense to beat us with your defense. You have to know our offense. That's all you have to do. I mean, I think we have too many weapons for a defense to totally lock us down, but keep going.
But my point is this. So you're going to have that. You're going to have single coverage on the outside with an extra guy in the box to stop the run. So do you really have faith in Khalif Raymond, who, should be a number 4 receiver. Peoples-Jones, who hasn't done anything in this league in the last 2 years, despite, some gaudy numbers early on in his career on the deep ball, or a guy like Tom Kennedy to possibly come in, or Antonio Green to come in and actually make plays for us. I mean, if teams try and stop us, I don't know, man. That's my concern, right? And I hear the argument, you gotta watch what you have and you can't spend all your money on certain positions. I'm just saying it's a slight, it's a little bit of a concern for me that we're going to have to rely on Goff, relying on, guys like that, and leaning on guys like that when, they're pretty much unproven, you can argue, in this league as a wide receiver.
I guess here's what I would say about Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had 840-ish yards in 2022, 61 catches. That's better than Josh Reynolds. So if DPJ can go back to those numbers, which he could, I mean, we know why he didn't do anything last year. The offense was already set. You're not going to be able to get in between Jahmyr Gibbs going for almost 1,000, Montgomery breaking 1,000, Gibbs putting 380 yards through the air, Reynolds putting up about 700 through the air, Amon-Ra St. Brown putting up almost 1,600 yards in the air, Laporta doing almost 1,000 yards in the air. You're not going to crack that. There's just no way. And you didn't go through training camp with Goff, and we already know how Goff operates. If you don't go through training camp, he's probably not going to work with you a whole lot. He's not going to build that chemistry and continuity with you that's going to, develop during the season when you're going through glorified walkthroughs, during the season, each week. So that's why DPJ wasn't very great last season. He was a safety valve that if somebody went down, he's inserted. So let's just say DPJ covers what Josh Reynolds did. Okay, so that hole's covered. If Amon-Ra St. Brown does Amon-Ra St. Brown things and puts up 1,500 yards this year, well, that hole's covered. Laporta, breakout rookie season, I think he can at least do 750, maybe 800 yards this year and probably 8 touchdowns. Touchdown for every 100 yards he catches is what I'm putting up for a prediction. And then Gibbs. I mean, there's no reason why Gibbs can't finally get loose and see him more in the passing game. So I think when you look at our offense, yeah, we might be thin as far as depth, but when you look at the starting cast, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Gibbs, Laporta, and Gibbs can play out of the slot, but Gibbs, Laporta, and Jameson, I mean, that's one of the better offenses you're going to find in the NFL. It's definitely a better offense than what the Chiefs had last year. It's a way better offense. And they won the Super Bowl with a $17 million wide receiver room. And I get it. If anybody got overpaid here, I would say that Amon-Ra St. Brown and spending $30+ million a year on Amon-Ra St. Brown could have been an issue. I think that that's a big issue because it's easier to get worse at quarterback than it is to get better, right? I mean, I think that everybody understands that. And Goff is a very, you're not just going to throw Hooker in there and expect Amon-Ra St. Brown to get 1,500 yards, would you? I mean, do you honestly think that if Hooker were to start right now over Goff, that this offense would be doing as well as it did last year? I don't think so. It's very difficult to just plug in any quarterback and to expect the same results, as is very difficult to plug in any receiver or any running back and expect the same results. But I think when you look at our starting cast, I think we're set. And now that I think we've upgraded our defense quite a bit, that's where this team is becoming more balanced. And when we're not offensive heavy anymore, now we can be a balanced team where the defense is creating opportunities and stopping the other team from scoring 25 points on average per game. We don't have to put up 35 points a game anymore. It can be a regular damn football game where we just need to score 3 points more than the opponent. Tight games, don't want to see them all the time, but I don't really think we're in that bad a shape. But I do believe if we overspent on one position, we overspent on receiver, and that's why we're thin at receiver. I wouldn't have spent $30 million on Amon-Ra St. Brown, but at the same time, you can't get rid of him because he's what exudes everything about this team and this culture, and is exactly what Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes want on this team to help the other guys, establish a role like him, emulate him, be like him, put the work ethic in. which, I mean, that all comes from within. You can't just copy somebody's, daily MO and expect to be the same kind of player. But shout out to Sports Talk with Rob for the $4.99 donation here. Super chat. You're not going to like this one, Tony. He says, Will, this guy speaking is a prime example why most Lions fans are delusional and will never be satisfied. Whoever plays QB for the Lions, shake my head, crazy. I mean, I think Tony's passionate. He's also a coach, so he has pretty hardline stances on things. But I mean, look, everyone can debate this till we're blue in the face. But what do you got to say to that, or to me, Tony?
Yeah, let me respond to that quickly. So, trust me, I am the furthest thing from a delusional fan when it comes to this team. I think I'm one of the most, Matthew Stafford, I argued for years when people hated Stafford, when people thought Stafford was a bum, I argued for years with Lions fans that if you put Stafford on any other team in the NFL, he would have been considered a top 5 quarterback and probably would have had some, more Super Bowl appearances than he had, right? I truly believed that. And, you see what happens. He goes away 1 year, wins the Super Bowl, right? I absolutely love Stafford. And again, I don't hate Jared Goff. It's just people have to be realistic when they look at this contract. And here's my other response is, you know what? The Lions last year, for the most part, were remarkably healthy. They had a few guys miss a game here and there, and that happened. And that's okay. What really concerns me is you have 2 guys going into their second season. And I know everyone says let's not talk about injuries. Let's not talk about the future. Well, I'm sorry, this is the NFL, right? Injuries are going to happen, and they happen every year. My concern is that the Lions are 1 injury away from being in real serious trouble offensively, right? To one of those skill position guys. And that's my concern when it comes to the depth, right? So I hear what you're saying about the Amon-Ra St. Brown contract. And again, my only response to that too quickly would be, do I feel like they overpaid? To a degree, yes. Okay, to a degree, I do. However, that being said, I don't think that paying guys that we've developed is a bad thing. I love that they signed Sewell. I love that they signed St. Brown to those big contracts, because it's just going to show guys, hey, listen, we want to go to Detroit. We know if we do the right things, we're going to get paid, right? It's going to happen. And finally, sorry, Randy, just to respond to what you said, I love Stafford, but don't like Goff. But Goff took this team much further than Stafford ever did. I hear that argument all the time. And and Randy, I never said I don't like Goff. I do like Goff. My response to that is quite simple. If Matthew Stafford had a single competent head coach throughout his career, Stafford would have done so much better than what he ended up doing for this team. Stafford never had a run game, right? He was throwing the ball 50 times a game back when teams weren't throwing the ball 50 times a game, right? The guy took an absolute beating for this city. And it's actually a real sour point. And hopefully, maybe we can talk about this on another show. But it actually really upsets me how Lions fans have just seemed to forget everything that Matthew Stafford did for this city and everything that Matthew Stafford gave for this team, right? And I really wish that Lions fans can understand that you can love Matthew Stafford, but you can also love Jared Goff. You don't have to be on team either or, right? And that's, I know that's a bit of a rant, but again, it's just something I'm pretty passionate about, because I feel like if you bash Stafford, you love Goff. And if you love Goff, you feel like you have to bash Stafford, right? That's not how it works.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. I've done some videos on it too, where it just seemed like, no, I mean, I get it. Like, Stafford's on a different team. You're not going to support him when he's in our house. Makes perfect sense. But he absolutely did bleed and bruise and broke his back for this city, literally broke his back for this city. And I'll never forget what he did. And I do agree that, he went through 4 head coaches and 5 offensive coordinators. It is almost impossible to get anything rolling with any consistency when you're constantly switching up the playbook. And then you don't have, an offensive line that's keeping you upright. And maybe the offensive line would have been better if he didn't have to chuck the ball 50 times a game, because you're asking, these guys to go into pass pro, which is, in my opinion, much harder than run blocking to a degree. Run blocking, you seem to be moving forward a lot more than backward, whereas pass pro, you're working backward and you've got to be able to see out of both sides of your head. You know what I mean? And I think that, to Steve's point, he says like Stafford had a bunch of interceptions. He sucked or whatever, but he also threw the ball a lot more. So I think that if you compare his interceptions to how many times he threw the ball versus the NFL average, it's a much lower stat than what you really think. He did have some untimely interceptions. I think Goff is a product of Lauren McQuaig's statement that, this is a timing system. This offense is built on timing. And that's part of the reason why we didn't see guys like DPJ get involved in the offense, because they weren't here long enough to develop the timing with Jared Goff, develop that relationship. Goff needs to know that you're going to be there. Same thing with Jameson Williams. He's been around for 2 seasons. He just now started to build some trust the last 4 or 5 games with Goff. And we're hoping to see a big leap forward in 2024, because now, unless he gets injured, should be healthy for training camp. And see, I told you guys I wouldn't yawn until Paul was off. First yawn of the day. So, that's how I look at it. I think that we're thin, and I think that we're thin until we get through training camp. But to sum up your little rant there about Stafford and everybody else, you can definitely be a fan of both. I'm not a fan of Stafford when he's in our house, but I'll never forget what he went through as a player, not having proper, coaching, behind him, not having a consistent offensive coordinator, Millen and Quintricia completely tanking this team financially. It was a nightmare. It was a complete nightmare for Stafford. So thankfully those times have changed, and we have some pretty fiscal, responsible people at the helm of this team, and a GM that knows how to draft. And that's what I also said too, Tony, was because we paid Amon-Ra St. Brown, we are now going to be living inside the draft for wide receivers, the free agency, the waiver wire, the 53-man cut day. That's where Brad Holmes is now going to be living to find us competent wide receivers. We are no longer going to be able to go out and pay, a $10 million guy like DJ Chark was that one season, even though he wasn't worth it. But we just won't see those types of signings anymore. So we're going to have one guy, and then behind him, we just hope that second and third guy is cheap enough and good enough. But like Jameson Williams, a rookie on a rookie deal, we hope that he turns out to be somebody. Same thing with Antoine Green. He has all the physical gifts in the world, has the speed, just has to put it together. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And you know what? I definitely appreciate this. On a kind of a side note here, we've talked about a lot of things here tonight, and we continue to talk about a lot of things. This is only my second time on the show. I can't tell you how much I appreciate just having these discussions, right? I feel like it's kind of cool that we can kind of sit back, have these discussions in a respectful way. And it's good. It's always good to disagree, because again, Lions fans have such varying views on things. Right. And I think it's really neat that we can kind of sit here and have smart, intelligent discussions without kind of yelling and screaming at each other and almost, going at each other. So I definitely appreciate that. And, even the people in the chat who disagree, and some of them that do agree, definitely appreciate that. And keep letting your voice be heard, right? That's what makes this fun, and that's why we love doing this. So thank you.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man. I think that there's a different approach to having solid debates or, disagreements, whatever you want to call it. You can have a debate with somebody and you can end the conversation pissed off. You could get pissed off during the conversation and it just goes sideways, right? Or you can have an intelligent debate and hang up the phone and be like, man, that was a great conversation. Can't wait to have another one. And it's all good to have different views. I mean, that's what makes us humans. We're all different with different DNA. We see things differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, for everybody that's listening now or watching now, or will be listening and watching in the future, that's what this is all about. Have these conversations, but be willing to accept, other people's opinions too, because they do matter. And you may not agree, but just agree to disagree and move on. There's one thing that remains the same when we're all done with this is we're all Lions fans. We all support the same team. At least the majority of us are. We do get some, occasional Chicago Bear and Packers and Vikings that show up in this stream. So it's all good, man. And Tony, you being a coach, man, I mean, you see things differently too. But here's my question. I mean, you're coaching that Canadian football crap. So we were just talking a minute ago about the, barely Division II type players. And, this is a different standard over here in the States. So, then there's that. I'm just kidding. And I'm just messing with you.
It's so true. It's so true. But I will say I did coach Drew Viotto, and Drew Viotto is he's in the race for the starting quarterback at Eastern Michigan this year. So he's another Canadian boy. So yeah, he's representing Eastern Michigan next year. He transferred from Minnesota actually last year. So, so there you go. So that's my claim to fame. I coached him. So there you go.
Yeah, it's funny. So let's get back to some of what Paul was talking about. Got a few more minutes here. So Mathieu Betts, Eric, you heard him talking about Mathieu Betts. So what did you think when he was saying, there was almost like a lightning difference here. Like it was a different kind of conversation about Mathieu Betts versus Manu. Like Manu has the gifts. He's got the physical tools. He's going to need a little bit of time. Maybe by his second season, he's going to be pushing for a starting position if one get. But Mathieu Betts was different. It was like, wait a second, this guy's different playing field. So how did that make you feel hearing that maybe there is more to Mathieu Betts here than meets the eye?
Oh, I love it because I haven't really watched much of the guy just when we did the show about him, So if he can come on and have an incredible year, that would be fantastic because we need that other piece, just that other piece on the other side of Hutch. It would make everything better on that defense. And then you add in the new DBs and corners. Oh, God, our defense could actually be really good this year. Just imagine having a top 10 defense or top 15. Top 15. We're going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, you can win with the top 15. It's been done before. I'm hoping that they creep into the top 10. So, Tony, we haven't really talked much since, we were at the draft party. I don't think we've been on a show since then. So, one, what did you think about Paul talking about Mathieu Betts? And does that change your mindset at all about Betts potentially making this leap this year and being an impactful player, even as a rotational player for the Lions?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a real shot to do it. We've kind of talked about this, but I do think, the depth at that position, outside linebacker, which is kind of where they're leaning towards playing him, right? Almost like that Derek Barnes type on the outside on the opposite side of Barnes. I think he can do it. He has the size, speed, and length to do it. I'm excited for it. Can I mention the draft quickly though, just to go a little bit off topic, I guess, from what you just asked?
Yeah, no. Okay. I want to get into the draft quickly right after the Betts answer. Right.
Yeah. So that's what I would say about Betts. I just think with him, it depends how the Lions want to use him, right? And I guess that's a pretty simple thing to say, but if they're going to rely on Betts for 10 sacks this season, and I think that's a little bit out of the realm of possibility. The one thing that is good about Betts that people don't realize is he's not young, right? Betts isn't a 24, 25-year-old guy. I believe he's 29 or 30, if I'm not mistaken, Will. I think he's a little bit older too, right?
I think he's 29.
Yeah, so he's 29 years old. So he's been around, right? He's seen a lot. He's done it. So I think that's a huge advantage for him. Again, not being a young guy coming over, but a guy who has a lot still left in the tank. And you want to talk about a motivated guy? My goodness, is he motivated? Again, he's one of those class act guys. And again, just to kind of put the trust in Brad Holmes a little bit, look at these guys that Holmes has kind of found out of the woodwork, right? Like take a guy like John Kaminsky, right? Was cut from a bunch of teams. Lions end up picking him up and he became a pretty solid piece for us. And he's an important piece to this team. I kind of see Betts as someone who could have a John Kaminsky type impact, maybe not as a starter, but kind of coming in as that rotational guy and just kind of doing it that way. That's kind of what I see.
So I guess I could agree with that. I mean, I hope he has a bigger impact than what Kaminsky did. I think Kaminsky had a pretty solid season his first season with us. And this should be what, season 4 for Kaminsky, I think? No, 3.
No, 3.
No, is it 3 or is it 4?
He signed in.
I think he signed in 21.
Yeah, he'll be going into his 4th year with. No, he signed a 1-year deal. He signed a 1-year deal, I thought, and then the Lions re-signed him for 2.
Okay. So at either way, this will be his 3rd season, and I'm obviously expecting him to kind of get back to where he was, and he kind of had a let off year last year. So I hope that the Betts can come in and rise above that bar. We need energy out of that side. But you wanted to talk about the draft, so let's talk about the defense for a moment here too. The Lions, like I mentioned earlier, I view this team as becoming more of a balanced team overall. The offense has been firing on all cylinders for the last 2 seasons. We may see a little regression this year, potentially, but I don't think it's going to matter in the grand scheme of things. I think that if this defense can really put it together and finally show, a big leap forward here in 2024. This is the no excuses season, like we've talked about for AG. He finally has his players. He finally has some DBs. We added DJ Reader. You added Marcus Davenport. There is no reason why Carlton Davis, Meek Rob, there's no reason why this defense can't go from a 19th ranked overall defense. I think we were 19th, 20th to a top 15, but I would dare say we could probably get to a top 10. If these corners can come in and play way better than we did last year, I think that's the key to this. We need the back of the defense to really outplay the front and allow the front to have that extra moment to kind of get home. They could never close and get home last year. So if those things happen, where do you see this defense and how do you think it affects the team overall? Being able to win that turnover margin is huge in the game, and we just haven't been winning the turnover margin. So I think that that's a bigger component to winning games than sacks, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and to kind of answer that, this is my thing about Arnold and Rakestraw and those 2 picks. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the picks. Obviously we needed corners, we needed some help there. I'm okay with it. I don't think it's any secret as to why these 2 guys were ranked 1 and 2 on the Lions draft board in terms of the cornerback position, according to Brad Holmes, right? Holmes said they were the top 2 guys that they had ranked. What do they both do well? What's their strength? If you look at their strength is against the run, right? They both ranked the highest, according to Pro Football Focus, they had the highest percentage against the run game. It was something like 86.7% for Arnold and something like 85 point something, I believe it was, for Rakestraw. These guys are great against the run, okay? The Lions are already great against the run, so it's clear what the Lions defense wants to do this year. It's absolutely clear as day. They want to make teams one-dimensional against them, right?
Yep.
They want teams to have to throw the ball 40 or 50 times a game against them, right? And that's their hope. As long as they can stop the run, that's what they're trying to do. Now, my concern, and I'm curious as to what Lions Nation and what you guys think about this, because my concern is, do we have the talent at the back end who are able to stop these big time wide receivers and kind of, rein them in? Last year, one argument I heard quite a bit was, well, Jefferson went off for 200 yards and Keenan Allen had that monster game against us, and we just gave up a ton of yards against wide receivers. Well, that's fine. We gave up a ton of yards against those guys, but we won all those games, right? Or we won most of those games. So it's clear that that's what the Lions are trying to do. Make teams one-dimensional, take away the run. Do you trust the talent at the back end to be able to step up and stop these guys in the long term?
Eric, I'm going to let you go first while I'm looking up something.
Say that one more time.
So do you think that the Lions, because again, it worked last year, right? Where the Lions really tried to make teams one-dimensional and take away the run. So with the addition of Arnold and Rakestraw, I don't see that personally as something to help us in our pass defense. How I see that is that's going to help us in the run defense, which is in turn going to help our pass defense. So do we have enough talent back there to be able to kind of stop these teams from just marching up and down the field against us by throwing the ball 50 times a game?
Yes, I truly believe we do. Now with Arnold and Rakestraw, and they don't necessarily have to be the starters. They can come in as rotational pieces, and having, who's the guy from Tampa Bay? Carlton Davis, and Amik Robertson. Man, this is a completely transformed defense. DJ Reader to Davenport or Betts, whoever plays on the end. I really believe now AG has the pieces to run the defense the way he wants to. If you look at the second half of the season where he started doing more rushing with Ife Malifonwu and other players, he really started doing the defense the way he wanted to. And why he didn't do that in the second half of the San Francisco NFC Championship game, I will never, ever understand for the rest of my life. It seemed like he just went to a prevent defense and it didn't work. And they threw everything they wanted and no one could stop anyone in the second half. But when he was doing the defense the way he wanted to, and we were stopping all the passes, he was getting to the quarterback, sacking the quarterback, making for interceptions, and made Brock Purdy look awful one-dimensional there in the first half. Second half, completely different game. And I can never understand why they changed like that.
All right. So for me to answer the question, I think it's multifaceted. Number one, this team definitely has more talent everywhere. I think the deepest part of this team is right now belongs on the defensive side of the ball. Now we have, a lot of newer guys that we don't know the entire story on. We know what's been written about them. We know what their stats are. But you can't say definitively that you've watched all of these players with enough time, of watching their tape or video or gameplay to really know who they're going to be, right? But here's what I would say about your question was, do we have enough talent in the back end to really help the front end? Was that how your question was posed?
Exactly. Yep.
And this is what I'll say. Number one, I don't think that Terrion Arnold needs to come in and be the number one. I think that you start him at CB2 or this defense changes its scheme a little bit where now, and this is kind of to Eric's point, the other day, maybe there's no more coverage assignment CB1, CB2. Maybe it's just, this is your guy for this game. This is your guy for this game. You're going to travel. And that's where I've hoped and wished that this defense would get to, that these guys are finally going to be able to travel, because we haven't done that in 3 seasons while Dan Campbell's been the coach. We haven't had the players in the back end to do it. So now I think that we do. But here's what I will say. You mentioned Jefferson. You mentioned giving up a bunch of yards to players. In 2022, I think that was a schematic thing that Dan Campbell and AG drew up was, we'll let Jefferson go off, but we're going to shut down Delvin Cook. So as long as we can shut the run down and we just let Jefferson do his thing, but then we control the rest of the wide receivers, we should win this game. They gambled and it worked. Now the second game, Cook went off, and then I think Jefferson got locked down. So, and I think we lost that game if I remember correctly. So maybe it didn't work as well. But you mentioned stopping the run, and what are these cornerbacks really good at? Something that I said back in March, I believe, on one of my shows was when the Lions go after a corner, they're going to go after corners that are good against the run. Because when you look at every player that we had on this defense last year in the back, in the DB room, every single one of them had stellar grades against the run. They all sucked in the pass. So that's what they were brought in for, even before they became Lions, is they were great against the run. So I knew going into this, the corners that we were going to target were the guys that were great against the run. And lo and behold, we get the two best guys that are great against the run, but they're also great at press man. I think Rakestraw's a little better as a, man off corner or coverage corner versus Arnold may not play as well in coverage. He's better man on man, right? Man press. But here's what I'll say about Carlton Davis and why I believe the last of these 200-yard games was last season. Carlton Davis in 2021 and 2022 was tasked with following the number one wide receiver. That was his goal. He traveled wherever Jefferson went, he would go, right? The number one wide receiver. Doesn't matter who it was, that's who he was taking. And in 2021, he only gave up 422 yards the whole season, a 57.1% completion percentage. In 2022, 622 yards, a 55.9 completion percentage. Jefferson alone had over 400 yards, I believe, last year against the Lions defense. So in the entire season that Carlton Davis played in 2021, he defended against, he defended and kept less yards off the scoreboard, right? Off the stat sheet than the Lions did just with one player last year. So that's where I believe that, we have a guy that can come in and fairly lock down a number one. And now when you're throwing Terry and Arnold into the mix to take on a number two, that's somebody that can be a number one and should be a number one at some point soon. Oh, you guys having to relog in?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're just trying to get my video back up and running here. Sorry, so keep going. We're good. We're just trying to get the video back up.
It may boot you out, but anyway,
it's all good.
So that's where I'm going with it. Is the Lions have addressed the biggest need on this team by also keeping their fundamental core the same. They want to be great against the run. You bring in DJ Reader, you stuff the run. Now Lee McNeil can turn into more of a pass rushing defensive tackle, which he's slowly kind of integrating into. I mean, in my opinion, he's still not as fast as he needs to be a pass rushing defensive tackle. But when you have DJ Reader on the line that commands the double teams, he can now do that. What is an offense going to do when you have to double DJ? And last year, Lee McNeil was doubled 50% of his snaps. And Aiden Hutchinson was doubled probably 35% of his snaps. You can't double three guys and commit six offensive linemen on three guys. You can't do it. You would leave the other side of the defense wide open, which does open the door for AG to be more schematic friendly and say, you know what? I'm going to blitz my linebackers now because it's wide open. I can go off the right side heavy. I can send Jack Campbell through the middle. And that's what I'm kind of seeing this year. Let the DBs do their thing. I know it's an oxymoron when I say we want to give the quarterback more time so that the defensive ends, the pass rushers, defensive tackles can get home and sack the quarterback. You typically don't want to give a quarterback more time. But the numbers speak to the best defensive ends in the league right now average about 4 seconds a sack. But Jared Goff is getting the ball off in 2.6 seconds. So you're not going to be able to sack Goff with those kind of numbers. But now if you're sending a free fire guy, a linebacker, a corner, a safety, somebody, they can get home a lot quicker. But I think you got to send them through the middle as opposed to the outside where it takes longer. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity, I guess is what I'm saying. I think that the sky's the limit now for what AG can draw up. And I think to Eric's point last year, at the last 6-7 games of the season, I was begging the Lions to run more nickel. I was begging the Lions in all of my breakdowns. I thought that that's what would work best, that the Lions would start sending defensive backs off the edge in more of a DB blitz type of situation. And they did, and it worked. So will we see it more this year? Potentially. I think that we're going to have the defensive backs now to be able to cover and not have to double up guys as often, so that we do have, a free fire ability to send somebody. So sky's the limit for AG in 2024. It's a no excuse season. He has his personnel, whether they're rookies or not. I think that between Arnold and Rakestraw, one of them is going to have a phenomenal season. And if Carlton can stay on the damn field, I think we're fine.
Yeah, my big question with the defense, it's this. I think you're going to see a little more zone this year. I really do. I think you're going to see the Lions run. I'm not saying they're going to go the majority of the time. I just think they're going to run a little bit more zone. And the reason being is if you watched, oh geez, I'm traumatized just thinking about it. The last 4 or 5 games of the season, what did teams run against us every third down? Go back and watch the tape, and they would get first downs on every third down. What did they run? They ran crossing patterns against us nonstop. You watch that San Francisco game. San Francisco watched the tape of Tampa because, we beat Tampa, but anytime they needed a play, they would run a crossing pattern, and our DBs could not keep up with them, and these guys would make catches over the middle of the field all game long. It happened non-stop. So I think that, I hope that Aaron Glenn is going to learn from last season. I'm just not sure how he's going to kind of, put the troops out there and what his strategy is, again, by drafting these run-stopping guys when we need that help with the coverage.
Well, hold on here. He drafted run stoppers, yes, but Arnold and Rakestraw are not just run stoppers.
I agree.
These guys are phenomenal in press man coverage, and Rakestraw is a little bit better than at off man coverage. So I think there were some video clips this weekend of Arnold. They were running crossers with a tight end. He went around and made the interception. Obviously it was a late throw on the boundary. And you're right about the crossing pattern. The thing is were they catching it over the middle? Were they 3 to 5 yards deep? Were they 7 yards deep? Maybe that was more of an indictment on our linebackers, because the middle of the field always seemed to be wide open. And there was no linebacker in sight. So I think now that we have the type of DBs that we do, guys that can handle press man, we didn't have one DB last year that was a press man. Not one. Not Cam Sutton, not Jerry Jacobs, nobody. Kendall Vildor might have been the closest we had. And that's not saying much. Now we have true press man ability on the outside and in the inside. Brian Branch obviously can do just about anything. He's just not the fastest, but I believe that he's better at press man because he can jam a little bit better at the line of scrimmage, which is also something the Lions didn't do last year. We hardly ever jammed anybody off the line. You want to slow these guys down and get them off their timing and help your ends work? You got to start jamming these receivers. And I didn't see it, not once. And I don't know why. It didn't make any sense to me. I don't know if it's a old school mentality, if it's an old type of defense, but why are we not jamming players? Do you have any thoughts to why, Tony, why we wouldn't be jamming guys at the line?
No, that's actually been my biggest complaint about Aaron Glenn. I'm not an Aaron Glenn hater by any means. I like Aaron Glenn, but my biggest complaint about him is his lack of adjustment in the passing game. When teams are doing something against us, again, let's go back to this crossing pattern. I know I sound like a broken record, but go back, again, you guys watched all the games. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Every single time a team needs a play, they would run that route. So why didn't he adjust? Where was the adjustment? Where was the in-game adjustment? Everybody knew it was coming. The announcers were talking about it, right? The announcers were saying this crossing pattern's coming. Look, watch for Debo in the slot. It's coming. Or watch for Kittle in the slot. It was coming. Everybody knew it. How does Aaron Glenn not drop a backer into the middle of the field or something like that, right? My concern with Aaron Glenn is just his ability to adjust in game. I like what he does. Is just, again, there's some things as from a coaching standpoint. Now this guy's in the NFL, so obviously, we're going to give him some clout with that, and he obviously knows what he's doing to a degree. But it's just frustrating when you're a fan watching back, and when you're us looking back saying, why aren't you doing this when this makes so much more sense, or try something new? and it's almost like he doesn't recognize it. So, that's something that I'm concerned about is our linebacker depth as well. Again, I feel like we didn't really address that at any point. So, to your point about the backers need to be better in the pass game in order for our defense to take the next jump. That's who I put the most credence on going into this season. Not our DBs, not our D line. I think our linebackers need to be better.
Yeah, I think that when you were talking about being thin at wide receiver, my biggest hang up right now is that linebacker. I mean, I love what Anzalone was able to do the last couple of seasons, racking up a bunch of tackles. That's great. I think that's more of an indictment on your defensive line. I don't think that your linebacker should necessarily have 130 tackles, a season. But when I look at our linebackers and their coverage ability, that's what scares me. I was really hoping that at some point throughout the draft, we would find a linebacker that had more coverage ability. Matter of fact, in 2022, that draft, I thought that the Lions were going to find a cover linebacker at some point, and they didn't. They took Broderick Martin instead, and that would be my next question for you. So Broderick Martin, from all reports that came in the other week, and some pictures that came in, I did a little spout about Broderick Martin looking slim, looking ready to go, in shape, definitely slimmed down, toned up, looks good. What's your expectation for Broderick Martin this year? Do you feel that this was a failed attempt at building depth? Obviously, we don't know what we don't know, but if he has slimmed down and gotten in his best shape of his life, what do you expect for Broderick Martin? What's a successful season behind Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader?
What? Go ahead, Eric. You can take that one.
Oh, I was reading comments.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah,
You
no.
go first.
Okay, that's fine. My expectations for Broderick Martin are this. Every single year you hear about this, right? There's always one player who has, revamped his body or put on weight or done something, right? And, you look back over the years and there's always a lot of hype behind a player. I feel like there's a lot of hype behind Martin right now. I think a lot of it is hope. I think a lot of it is we need him to be really good this year. I went back and watched some of his tape from last season, Broderick Martin, the few games that he was in. And the one thing that he did really well was he didn't necessarily get pushed back. He was able to kind of hold the zone, right? And that's the first thing I look at from a coach is as a D lineman playing D tackle in the NFL, are you getting blown downfield 5-7 yards every single play? And he didn't. He was able to kind of hold his own in there. The one thing that he lacked was that little bit of burst, right? I think you guys have all seen that too. He lacked that little bit of extra speed. The fact that he's actually trimmed down, lost some weight, added some explosiveness, Eric knows this. I'm generally more of a pessimist than I am an optimist when it comes to the Lions, just because I've been so, traumatized over the years like so many others. But with Broderick Martin, I'm taking the opposite approach. I actually am more optimistic than I am pessimistic about him. Anybody who can dedicate themselves, listen, I'm a big guy. It's not easy to revamp our bodies. It's not easy to lose weight and add muscle, right? Those are difficult things to do. And the fact that he's done it, I'm very impressed by, and I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. I would not be surprised at all if he was one of our starting D tackles by the end of the season. And I know that sounds crazy right now, but I'm just saying I would not be shocked at all if he's a starter by the end of the season.
So you think a starter over Aleem McNeil or DJ Reader? Or you mean starting rotation?
I do. I think he'll be in a starting rotation with those guys. But, between us, again, I don't want to talk about injuries and all this. I'm not relying a whole lot on DJ Reader this year. I'm just not. If we can get, 7-8 games out of him, I'll be thrilled. But I'm just not expecting a lot out of Reader this year.
Yeah, that would be disappointing. I mean, there's a lot of hype around Reeder. I mean, the word is he's ready to rock and roll. I guess we'll see what happens in training camp, because that's going to be the telltale sign if he truly is ready to go. I'm expecting a lot out of Reeder. I really am, but I'm also under the impression that it may take him a few games to kind of get into his old swing habits. You know, it may take him to week 5, and I'm okay with that as long as he's healthy and improving. Maybe they'll give him a pitch count or something if training camp doesn't go well for him. But I'm expecting a lot out of DJ Reeder, if not this year, definitely by next year. He's just the guy that's got to stay healthy. That's probably my only knock on Brad Holmes, to be honest with you, is the high upside picks, the high upside offseason acquisition. They tend to bite more often than help your team. Brad's been extremely lucky. I just hope that luck continues this year, and DJ Reeder turns out to be the player that we've been missing. I'm a huge proponent of interior pass rush. I think that interior pass rush has always been the way to the quarterback, which helps your ends, your pass rushers, your outside linebackers, everybody else do their job. Without an interior pass rush, it just kind of never gets going. The defense just doesn't really get going. It seems like it's harder to always fight from the outside than it is to fight from the inside and help the outside kind of do their work, So anything else for tonight's show? We're going to be ending it here in about 90 seconds.
Yeah, no problem. My only last, kind of thing about Reeder is those big guys, when they get hurt, it's generally, more difficult for those guys to come back and play at a high level for a long period of time. So the injuries do kind of concern me with him. But again, if we can get a few games out of him, 8 to 10 games out of him, I'll be thrilled. But again, a slow, gradual pace. But again, I'm not concerned about it because I actually have faith in Broderick this year.
So one more thing, and this is a great point by J-Rod and Mike P in here. A couple of good comments. Mike P believes obviously the pick routes really kill man or zone. And I believe in that too. And pick routes are tough. I don't care what defense you're in. They're always tough to guard against. I think that, any team that's using a pick route consistently, good luck. They're especially if you have, 2 or 3 really good wide receivers and a good tight end. It's really tough to stop. But also in here, our J-Rod said, where'd it go? T. Williams knows that changes need to happen mid-game, so that won't happen this year. Talking about making the changes. I wonder how much of this is just relayed information to AG, or if the positional coaches are allowed to make the adjustments and the changes, without running it up the chain. I mean, if there's a spot change that needs to happen, I would assume that the guys on the field would recognize it and just do it. I mean, Dan Campbell has said plenty of times that these guys have the ability to change the play within the scheme, but not change the play completely. We had some freelancing last year. There was a couple of situations where Aiden Hutchinson got burnt because they changed completely what they were supposed to do, and they weren't supposed to do that. Dan said he owned up to it. They live, they learn, they move on. So I guess I wonder how much of this, making mid-game changes relies upon the positional coaches to communicate it to AG, to make those changes. And if he doesn't know those changes need to happen because he's involved in his bubble, which I'm not trying to give him an out or an excuse, that maybe they're not happening quick enough. And then they tried to do something, at halftime, and it's like the other team has already moved on. And it seems like that's why our halftime defense coming out of the first half, it never seemed to really hold it together. It almost seemed like they tried to do too much in the second half. Kind of like what happened in the NFC title game. They got too aggressive. And instead of playing more of a prevent defense, instead of playing, your bigger dime packages, I feel we got way too aggressive and overshot our opportunity too often in getting burned. So a lot of little things that need to be cleaned up. Can it be cleaned up? It can. Again, Tony, appreciate again tonight you coming on. Number one, number two, bridging that gap between Paul Orzetti and Rock Down Podcast and making sure that interview could happen. A lot of great information tonight about Giovanni Manu, the Canadian Football League, kind of what's up next for the Canadian Football League, and the fact that he spoke about Brad Holmes really has to do his homework, a lot of homework to find these players. These aren't players that are well known. These are guys that are forgotten about up north. Nobody's really taken a hard look at them, but you know who is now is the Detroit Lions. And how many more players can come out of the Canadian Football League? We'll see. There was plenty of them that were drafted this year. Even Theo Johnson was a tight end that was drafted this year that was a previous Canadian football player, I believe. I think he was the second Canadian football player taken, even though he did play for Penn State. No, I'm sorry. Purdue. Was it Purdue? Who did Theo play for?
He played for Penn State. I thought he played for Penn State.
Yeah. The tight end played for Penn State.
He's from Windsor, right? Born and raised in Windsor. So.
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah. It's nice to see that, we're doing the things as a Lions team, right? The managing component of this team is doing the right things to go out and find players and allowing these scouts a little bit of extra rope to go out and find the players that can make the difference. So we'll see what happens. But tonight, man, I learned a lot. And I have to say, my outlook on Manu and bets is a lot brighter. What do you think, Eric? How's your outlook?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely loved it. This was great tonight. I learned a bunch. And the only thing I want to leave everybody with tonight is when I woke up this morning, I looked in my closet and I looked through all my brand new black jerseys and I picked out this one.
Oh, just for Tony, right?
Today. Take that, Tony. He was the second person I texted. Yeah. Will was the first.
I thought that for a minute there, you were going to say that you woke up and you were going to pull the Harbaugh quote where it's not today, it's the day, which is what he said this morning at 4 a.m. apparently. Whatever, Jim Harbaugh. Like he can go back in the closet for all I care. He's lucky that the Lions aren't playing the Chargers this year. It's all I got to say. All right, yeah. Tony, what do you got to say before we end the podcast?
No, just really appreciate this again. Appreciate the chat. Appreciate being here. Thank you so much for having me. Love doing this. Let's keep rolling. Go Lions. And, we got the dog days of summer coming up. But the nice thing is there's always going to be stuff we can debate. So let's bring it back and appreciate everybody in the comments. So appreciate that, Mike. Thanks so much. And let's keep rolling, guys. Go Lions.
Yes, sir. So quick schedule update. So Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays is the new podcast time, 7:30. I'm going to be rolling at 7:30 every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday to August 1st. Rise and Grind morning show, backing at it tomorrow morning, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, starts at 8 a.m. So be sure to look out for the link for that. I think we got the link gremlins actually worked out tonight. But you got to fix those damn video gremlins you got going on over there.
We'll get it fixed. One real super quick, cool thing. All you guys out there in the chat and everything that gave me all the really good vibes, I'm going to need a few more of those. So I got a call back from the Netflix series. I get to go film a sizzle reel with them tomorrow. So I'm going to do some filming with a brand new Netflix show tomorrow. So wish me luck, everybody.
Sounds great, man. Good luck with that. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. right here on the Rise and Grind morning show. Tony, safe travels back across the border there. Don't bring anything across that I wouldn't. All right, you guys, take care. Have a good night. Bye-bye.